Hello YouTube, Dave here again. The date that I'm recording this is May 18th, and it's actually my birthday today, so I decided to actually treat myself to something. I went down to Giant Robot Comics and I picked up a copy of the brand new released just today as the advance date for hobby stores. I picked up the Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. So this is the hobby store exclusive cover that you can get. So this isn't something that if you were to go to like Chapters in Canada or Barnes & Noble, I think in the States is sort of their equivalent, you're not going to be able to get this version of the cover. Everything on the inside of the book, the contents, there's no bonus like chapters or pages or anything that distinguishes it from the the more widely available copy. It's just literally the cover. Now I do actually also have a copy of the normal cover that I pre-ordered from Chapters. It hasn't been shipped out yet. They'll probably be getting that one closer to the actual release date, which is May 29th. But I thought I would go through and just sort of flip through this book and give my early impressions. This is not necessarily a full-blown review, just because I've only really had this in my hands for a little over 2 hours at this point in time, and in that meantime, I had to do some other things like, get my, daughter lunch and eat something myself, and I haven't really had a lot of time to read it, but I have flipped through it, and I kind of want to, just like I said, just give my early impressions on this book, and we'll see how it is. So the first thing we'll do is we'll flip through, and then I'll come back with my initial thoughts. Alright, so here is the book itself. Now again, this is the hobby shop exclusive cover. So this is not the one that you're going to see if you go to major book retailers, but in the early days, when it first comes out, your local game store, will hopefully have at least a few of these. Giant Robot, where I go to, they had, I think, 3 or 4 of them that they got, and then they had like a whole stack of the regular covers. The one thing I will say is that the texture on the cover is very much like sort of a matte finish, and the only way I can really try to explain it is if you own the 4th edition D&D books, or the 4th edition era D&D books of, I want to say it's Menzo Berenzin and Ed Greenwood's like Elminster's Forgotten Realms, Guide to the Forgotten Realms, or Ed Greenwood Presents Elminster's Forgotten Realms, whatever the title of that book is, the cover feels the exact same as this, like very sort of matte kind of finish to it, not as smooth and glossy. So it definitely feels a little bit different when you're running your hands over it. I do know that there was also a recall, I guess, by Wizards of the Coast for a lot of these covers. There was some sort of manufacturing error with them, and I don't really know too much details on that. I think it was something just like damaged the covers pretty badly. So this one's actually in pretty good shape. There is one issue with the book itself, but for me it's not going to be such a huge deal that I would try to return it or anything like that, because I don't know how easy it would be for me to get another copy with this cover, and I have a regular version on its way to me, which will probably be the one that I use anyway when it comes to actual gameplay use. The reason that I say that is if I hold the book up, and again it's got sort of like this nice metallic, like the gold and the letters, it's kind of hard to pick up in camera. But you can see that, there's a nice reflection off everything. But with the texture, the finish on the cover, it reacts to basically just the regular, just natural oils in your hands. So I was handling this book. I washed my hands before I started actually flipping through it. But it is a warm day, and I live on the top floor of my apartment building, so it gets warm. And just from a little bit of sweat, like right now my hands feel absolutely bone dry, but you can see, and I think it shows up a little bit here, but you can see just some evidence that the book was being handled. Now I did take a Kleenex to these spots, and they do come off, like it does go back to the normal look after a while, but it is really noticeable, and honestly that's something that I would kind of hold as a little bit of a negative when it comes to getting the, this type of cover. This is the first alternate cover version of the 5th edition D&D book that I've picked up, and I can honestly say, unless they do another one that has a really awesome looking beholder on the cover, or like a mind flare like they did for Volo's Guide to Monsters, this will probably be the last of like these special editions. But I mean, it is nice looking. I'm not going to say that it's, a bad looking book. It is actually a really nice looking cover. Anyway, so that aside, the back here doesn't really have any information. There's none of like the little marketing stuff that you would have normally. It's just the different artwork. Just going to do sort of a cursory flip through. So you got, and again, the contents inside the book is going to be the same regardless. So nothing actually changes. There's the cover for the normal store version, and this is the alternate cover for game stores. And the one thing that I will say is that it has a lot of creatures and stuff on here. Not all of the things that are on the cover are actually shown or used in the book. Like, I don't think there's anything with displacer beasts in the book itself, stuff like that, hooked horrors. But anyway, just looking at the table of contents, it's mainly a new monster manual, or a monster manual supplement, which is one of the best ways to use this book. So, starting from page, I think they've got these in alphabetical, not by the page numbers themselves, but starting from page 115 of this book, you've got the list of monsters which is in it, which is pretty cool. The first chapter is dedicated to the Blood War and sort of describing that, and it is essentially the eternal struggle between the demons and the devils. So the demons of the Abyss versus the Lords of the Nine Hells. That's what that whole thing is about. There is some really fantastic artwork in here and a lot of really great information. I guess I should show the other chapters as well. There's also information on elves, dwarves and Durgar, Gith, and halflings and gnomes. So, like I said, just kind of flipping through here. So, like I said, there's a lot of great artwork scattered throughout this book. But there's a couple of things that I think, as far as artwork, is kind of missing or lacking. And I'll touch on that when I get to my actual sort of impressions part of the video. So what I'm going to do is just actually tip this down. And we're just going to kind of flip through it. And just the way that I have, with the tables, it's going to be difficult to show everything, but we'll just kind of go through. I'm not going to flip through each and every individual page, but like I said, there's a lot of great information in here. One of the cool things in the Blood War section is it gives alternate Tiefling subraces for the other Lords of the Nine Hells. So, for example, the Tieflings that are in the player's handbook, for example, those are the ones that are derived from Osmodeus or Osmodeus. I've heard it pronounced a few different ways. And then you have, so if you're a Tiefling from Beelzebul, you have, like, your charisma increases by 2, your intelligence increases by 1, and their legacy abilities are slightly different. A lot of them still get thaumaturgy, but they get like different types of spells as they level up than what the ones in the player's handbook do. You have Dispater or Dispater, Furnia. So it gives all the different Lords of the Nine Hells what kind of Tieflings they spawn, and even some artwork there. So this is what one might look like or tend to dress like if they're derived from Levistus, who is basically frozen in his realm, imprisoned by Osmodeus himself, and Zerael, who is, I believe, the lord of the first layer of the Nine Hells. So it used to be Bel, which was this kind of powerful pit fiend, but he's been replaced. But a lot of good information. You got some charts for creating like devil-based NPCs, like their personality traits, their motivations. And again, we go into the actual, so this is the demon section, and you get some like demonic boons. So, for example, these are the things that their cultists can get, like leaders of the demonic cults can get some various increases in some of their abilities, which is pretty cool. And then we move on to the racial stuff. Which actually sounds bad the way that I said that, but the information on the different kind of core races, non-human races, in Dungeons and Dragons. And what's great about this is, I'm not going to go through it all right now, but this is really flavor intensive. So there's a lot of what I guess you could call fluff in this book, which is awesome. Like, you know, the fact that most of the, you know, the first few chapters is primarily just information, which I think is really great. It goes over, you know, with the racial information, it goes over some of their, like, characteristics, their culture, some of their history. You've got, like, the different deities. And so you have, well, the one thing that I wasn't going to talk too much about until I actually got to read it was the section here, the Blessed of Corellon. And essentially what it is, there was a little bit of a discussion about this, or I guess you'd call it a little bit of a debate, where there are certain types of elves that can, at the start of each day, just change their gender. They can go from male to female, and essentially do that on a whim. And so I was curious as to how that was actually going to be implemented. If it was going to be a particular type of elf that, you know, could do it, but it would be like there's some creatures in nature that can actually change their gender, but it's in response to an imbalance in the genders in their, you know, in their environment. So there are certain types of fish, I believe, that can change from male to female. So if there's a shortage of females, then some of the males will convert to female and then back. And I thought that would have been sort of an interesting concept if they did that. But this is just a blessing by Corellon the Rithian himself, and it's just something that lets them change their gender. So it's, to me, this isn't the best way to implement that kind of idea. I think it would have been better to have had it to actually be integrated into a particular subrace of elves or a particular culture of elves that might be isolated from, you know, the typical elven tribes or clans. It could be a subrace that's native to the Feywild, for example, where the Eladrin come from, but at the same time, like, these the elves that would have this ability would have been, you know, subjugated by the Fomorians. And when they escaped, you know, they were in such small numbers that, you know, it was just like an evolution sort of trait that allowed them to change gender to try to propagate their race and continue it. And I think that would have been a much better way to do it. So this I'm a little bit disappointed in the way that they did that, because I think that there was a more interesting way to incorporate the ability to change gender. And to be completely and totally honest, when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, you know, the gender really doesn't have a mechanical effect. So it's purely a flavor thing to begin with, and I think it would have been better to have incorporated that as a you know, a mechanic that's based off of, you know, an actual reason, instead of just having it be, you know, your god decides that, hey, you can do this, and it has no other real rhyme or reason to it. But anyway, that was sort of my take on that. So so this does go over things. It does reintroduce the Eladrin, which I think is really cool, because I love the Eladrin. A lot of great information on the Drow, including all of their deities. So the Drow deities have been reinstated, which I think is really cool. There was a series of novels in the Forgotten Realms where, after the War of the Spider Queen, Lolth basically went out and decided to destroy every other Drow deity, I think except for one, who was very subservient to Lolth to begin with. And so yeah, but you know, they brought all of them back, including Alestria, I think is her name, the chaotic good Drow god, which I've always liked. And just, again, some really cool stuff. And brings back the Raven Queen, who was brought into D&D 4th edition. It also brings back the Nagpas. And a lot of people may not know what that is, and I'll show the picture of it later on. But for me, that's really, really cool to have the Nagpas. They're basically like a squat, a vulture-like humanoid. But the reason that that's so cool is they are in the creature catalog for the D&D Rules Cyclopedia, which is something that I've been reading a lot of lately. Just at the end of the elf section here, I'll get back to that in a second, but at the end of the elf section, you have your different sub-races. And as far as player character options, the sub-races are essentially all you're going to get. So there's no like class features or anything like that, just some racial stuff. But you've got the Eladrin, which are cool, and the Eladrin choose a season type, and they get different abilities based off of the season that they're a part of. Different personality traits. Their charisma score goes up by 1 in addition to the +2 to dexterity, so you still get the regular elf traits, and then they get that as well. You've got your sea elves and your Shatter Kai. But I don't think it actually gives... Oh yeah, there's their traits. So they get +1 to Constitution, resistance to Necrotic, and so the Shatter Kai are followers of the Raven Queen. From what I can gather, just from reading this here really quickly, is the Raven Queen was sort of the third faction that split off during the rift or the schism in the elf race that led to the Drow becoming what they were, and Lolth, splitting off from the pantheon of elven deities. And so, Corellon and his followers went one way, Lolth and her followers went the other way, and I guess the Raven Queen was sort of kind of split down the middle, and she retreated to the realm of Shadow, the Shadowfell basically, and her followers went with her there. They were also responsible for creating the Nagpa, which was a misstep. So that's not, I guess, one of the better parts of their history, but because I guess the Nagpa are inherently evil. All right, so here we got our section on dwarves, and again, this is just all flavor text, and I can't wait to read this. Some of my favorite books for 3.5 D&D were the Races series, Races of the Wild, Races of Stone, Races of Destiny, and it had a lot of great flavor text in there as well. What's also great is that it does tend to talk about the different campaign settings and the types of elves or races that you get there. So you got the dwarves, so Greyhawk, you have Hill Dwarves and Mountain Dwarves. The Forgotten Realms, you have your Gold Dwarves and Shield Dwarves. And then you've got Dragonlance, and it actually talks about the Gully Dwarves. I didn't notice that the Gully Dwarves are actually a race that you can play in this. I hope they are, because my god, that would be just fantastic if you could actually play a Gully Dwarf. Because they were just so cool. But it doesn't look like it. I see like the Durgar, and then it just goes on to the dwarf table. So unfortunately no Gully Dwarves there, but if you want to play a Durgar, they are available in here. And they include their ability to enlarge or reduce themselves, as well as their ability to cast invisibility as natural spell-like abilities. So, alright, and here, the next section is the Gith and their endless war. So this is the Githyanki and the Githzerai. Now, I love the Githyanki, and I have ever since the Incursion storyline from Dungeon and Dragon magazines. And I just really want to see them do something with the Githyanki in particular. Githzerai, I can kind of take or leave. They're basically just monks. Which is fine, but I like the Githyanki. I think there's a lot of cool stuff going on with them. This picture here, definitely details their alliance with Red Dragons. So Red Dragons and Githyanki are often seen together. I actually have a couple of Githyanki miniatures that are mounted on Red Dragons, and there is Vlaakith herself, the Lich Queen, who I have the miniature for. And I guess spoiler, I want to actually make a video kind of talking about her as a villain showcase at some point. So anyway, you got your Githyanki and your Githzerai. You also have the Githyanki city, and I can never remember how to pronounce that. Tunarath, I believe is how you pronounce it. And then you got the Githzerai. So these are more monastic, contemplative types. The only thing that these two races have in common is usually their hatred of mind flayers. And so the Mind Flayers or Lithids had enslaved the original race of the Gith until a figure rose up who just proclaimed themselves Gith as their name and title, and overthrew their Lithid slavers. And then from that point, there was sort of this philosophical divide between the Githyanki and the Githzerai, and they became the two separate races. But here you can actually play them. So you've got your Gith basic traits. So as a basic Gith, your intelligence score gets up by +1. You can speak Common and Gith, and then you choose your subrace. Your speed is 30 feet, and that's pretty much it for that. But the Githyanki get a +2 increase to their strength. They get the Decadent Mastery. So it says you learn one language of your choice, and you're proficient with one skill or tool of your choice. In the timeless city of Tunarath, Githyanki have bountiful time to master odd bits of knowledge. That's pretty cool. Martial Prodigy, you are proficient with light and medium armor, and short swords, long swords, and great swords, so that's regardless of the class that you pick. Githyanki Psionics, you can cast Mage Hand Cantrip, and the hand is invisible when you cast a cantrip with this trait. When you reach 3rd level, you can cast the Jump spell once with this trait, and you regain the ability to do so after you finish a long rest. When you reach 5th level, you can cast Misty Step once with this trait, and you gain it back when you finish a long rest. Intelligence is your spellcasting ability. Githzerai get +2 to Wisdom, which makes sense. Mental Discipline, you have advantage on saving throws against Charmed or Frightened. Githzerai Psionics, you gain the Mage Hand Cantrip. The Mage Hand is invisible. At 3rd level, you get the Shield spell that you can do once, and then at 5th level, you get Detect Thoughts, which you can do once, and you get them back when you take a long rest. Wisdom is the spellcasting ability for those spell-like abilities. And then we're going to move on to... See, with the Player's Handbook, I always kind of joked that the halflings were kind of terrifying looking in that book. So, in response, I was thinking, you know, there's halflings and gnomes in here. This will be their chance to sort of, you know, change how just weirdly deformed the halflings look. And this is their response. I don't even know how to handle that. It looks like there's something really wrong going on here. So, halflings are still, you know, nightmare fuel as far as their depiction go. This one doesn't actually look that bad. You know, that's an okay looking halfling. Face is still a little, like, weird and big. But that one's okay. I don't know why they had to do that. It's just wrong. Anyway, so you get some information here. The halfling stuff, I think, is pretty much all just flavor text. I don't think there's actually any new subraces of halfling that they present, which is kind of a shame. And their halflings in the multiverse is relegated to this, like, smaller, like, chart, or not chart, but what do they call it there? With the little box text, anyway. I'm having a complete and total mental lapse here. But what is cool is that they do mention, in Dragonlance, they do mention the Kender, which is always a source of, you know, divide between, you know, Dungeons & Dragons fans. A lot of people really, really hate the Kender. I don't mind them, but I can see how they could definitely be annoying. Then we got our gnomes here, and they do have some information for the deep gnomes, which the deep gnomes were also in the Princes of the Apocalypse book, which you can kind of see here as well. There's their traits in addition to the regular gnome stuff. And then we're going to get into our bestiary. And so the monster manual section of this book is pretty thick. Again, I'm not going to go through every single thing necessarily in detail, but there are some honorable mentions that I really want to show here. I love that they have the Alep. I always loved that monster. The Astral Dreadnought from the first edition Manual of the Plains looked really great. The Bone Claw was something that I thought was kind of cool. The Cadaver Collector, good old Choker, which is also in the creature catalog for the D&D Rule Cyclopedia. And I got to do a video on that one because, my god, the artwork for that is just unbelievable. The Corpse Flower, this stuff's eh. The Deathlock, not to be confused with Deathclock from Metalocalypse, which was an amazing show, by the way. And then we've got some new types of demons. Or, well, not necessarily new, but new demons that they're putting into 5th edition. And one of the ones that I really like here is the Nabasu, but it bothers me because it doesn't have the Lesser and Greater, which was the whole point of the Dungeon of Death module for 2nd edition Forgotten Realms, where they have to absorb a certain amount of souls before they can become the greater versions of themselves. So I think there was a little bit of a missed opportunity there, but they're still pretty cool nonetheless. And now we're going to get into a section here with the, first of all, that's a really nice artwork, but we have the Demon Lords. So we have Baphomet, Demogorgon, Frez'Urblu, Grazit, Jubilex, 151, okay. Orcus, Yenogu, and I always mispronounce this one too. Zuktmoy. I probably butchered that. Now they may look familiar, and again I'll touch on those in a moment. Then we just have our other things here. The Abashi are pretty cool. So these are a combination of demonic, or not demonic, but fiendish blood, devil blood, and dragons. So you actually have them here. And they had them in the Forgotten Realms in 3rd edition, but they didn't really look like the dragon types that they came from. Now they really do, and they look really great. Alright, and then we've got Archdevils. Now, there's only one of the actual Lords of the Nine is in this book. And that's something that I'll probably touch on as well when I get to my impressions part, because I kind of want to save all that for the end. But the rest of these are either just like very, very powerful devils, generals for other devils' armies, deposed Lords of the Nine. Now this one's kind of cool. You got the Moloch here. And it has the callback to, I guess this must have been a shrine to Moloch, because you've got the cover from the 1st edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook there, with the characters trying to pry the gems out of the eyes. So I guess that was a shrine to Moloch. So here we have Zerael, and this is the only actual Lord of the Nine that is in this book. And then we got just our drow here, so new types of drow, which is cool. The drow matron mother, which could be, very much a major campaign threat. So I love that. Drow, I love the drow, and I use the drow often as villains in my campaign, so it's pretty cool to have them, more stuff for them. You got your Durgar. And speaking of that statue, here's another callback to the Sacred Statue Monster. So that's pretty cool. I like that. You've got your Eladrin and Elder Elementals. So you got Leviathan, or Leviathan if you played Final Fantasy II for the Super Nintendo, or Final Fantasy IV. Leviathan, Phoenix, Elder Tempest, and the Zaratan. It's pretty cool. Of course, you have your Myrmidrons. And you got your GIF, so you've got your Hippo people. These guys, I think, were a big part of the Spelljammer setting for Dungeons & Dragons, or Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition. They're cool, but I don't like firearms in my fantasy. And they have a musket and a pistol. And a fragmentation grenade. So, I don't know how I feel about them overall, but that is an amazing, amazing picture. Just some Githyanki, Grey Render, the Marat Inevitables, which I actually have a miniature of. So here's the Nagpa. And the reason that I thought that they included this was really awesome is because it is part of like the Rule Cyclopedia, that version of Dungeons & Dragons. It was a monster that was in the creature catalog. But I've also been playing a lot of the Chronicles of Mystara arcade collection, which had 2 arcade games from the early 90s. And in the second one, The Shadows over Mystara, a Nagpa was one of the major, one of the last bosses of the game. So I just thought it was really cool that they had them in there. The Nightwalker, which looks a little bit different. I don't know, I kind of like the original Nightwalker a little bit better, but still kind of cool. Then we got Ogres, the Frost Salamander, the Shatterkai, and you got so the Shatterkai have a Soulmonger. And this is funny because I'm still running Tomb of Annihilation for D&D Adventurers League, which I only run once a month, but I'm still running that. And the Soulmonger is like the big, artifact in that adventure. And you can also have one that's just like a Shadow Elf kind of thing. So I almost want to change it to have a Soulmonger guarding the Soulmonger, but anyway, that may be overkill. And just again, some really nice artwork. I believe this is taken actually from. I think this is from Tomb of Annihilation, but I could be wrong. But that artwork does look familiar. Skull Lord, I love that monster from 4th edition, and then just some really weird creatures there. Then you have the Star Spawn, and you've got the Star Spawn Larva Mage. They're kind of just basically the whatever the Nightmare Plane kind of thing is, where all the aberrations originally came from. Sword Wraiths, Undead. We got some weird trolls. You got some turtles. I kind of want to make a monk turtle and have it be a ninja turtle. So Rot Trolls, Spirit Trolls, Venom Trolls, and the Dire Troll, which just looks really weird. Yugoloths, Vampiric Mist. It's cool to have that back. And yeah, and that's it. Then we get into just our last stuff here. You got the challenge rating information, and I think, does it have the actual stat blocks by type? Alright, yeah, so sorry about that, but you got the stat blocks by type, which is cool. The challenge rating, which is great. Creatures by environment, which is great. And that is it. So that is the flip through of Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. I talked a little bit about some of my thoughts on it already, but what I'm going to do now is just sort of collect myself a little bit and go into my overall impressions. Alright, so that was my way more comprehensive flip through of Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes than I was initially intending. I just kind of got caught up, I guess, and just started flipping through. But anyway, as far as my first impressions of this book goes, I'm just going to say right off the top that I think that this is a really good book. I like the fact that until you get to the monster stat blocks, the majority of the pages are taken up with flavor text and descriptive text of, the different cultures and races and, the Blood War, which I'm hoping the Blood War is actually going to factor in pretty majorly into an upcoming story, which I'll touch on in a little bit. But there's a lot of really great stuff in this book. And, what this really is it's basically the sequel to Volo's Guide to Monsters. It follows pretty much the exact same sort of template. And it does an okay job of it. I think that this is, again, a really excellent book. Where Volo's Guide to Monsters focus solely on monsters, this one gives you just enough player character stuff to give you a few new options without it feeling like another full-blown player-based supplement like Xanathar's Guide to Everything certainly had. A majority of it was geared towards new player options. So I'm glad that it wasn't inundated with that stuff, but I'm also glad that there was enough of it overall to give, again, your players some new options. I like the fact that they have the Eladrin in here, because I always loved the Eladrin, from 4th edition D&D. I thought that they were a really cool idea. And, the thing with the Deep Gnomes, for example, they were in another previous supplement effect. They were in the Prince of the Apocalypse adventure, and they were in the Player's Guide, which I also have a physical copy of. So I've got enough Deep Gnome for now. I don't need Deep Gnomes to be printed as a race in any other books for a while. So let's kind of throttle back on that one a little bit. But as far as some of the options that I think should have been in here when you're looking at the races, I think there was a big missed opportunity to have the racial variants from the other campaign settings really heavily focused on or given their chance to actually do something or be played, especially if you want to create a 5th edition campaign based off of those settings. Like, I'm a big fan of the Dragonlance setting. I've got the 3rd edition Dragonlance setting. I've got some, 2nd edition AD&D Dragonlance stuff. I have the Dragonlance Adventures for 1st edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. It's a setting that I like. And I really think that this book should have had the Gully Dwarves and the Kender in there. They didn't really necessarily need the Dwarven types or the Elven types because they're more or less, just variants or different names to the versions of the elves that they already have. But the Kender are a little bit different, and the Gully Dwarves are completely different. And the fact that they would mention the Gully Dwarves and not have them available as a new player race, to me is a bit of a letdown because I actually really like the Gully Dwarves. And for anyone who understands the Gully Dwarf numbering system, I always wanted to play a Gully Dwarf scout, and the players would hate me. The other players, I would say, would hate me, but I never got the chance to do it. Because, how many dragons did you see on the other side of that mountain? Only 2, So, anyway, that's definitely an inside joke to anyone who understands the Gully Dwarves. But to me, that was, again, just a little bit of a missed opportunity. As far as the monsters in this book goes, again, there's a lot of really great stuff in here. I was a little bit curious at first as to why they reprinted the Demon Lords that were in the Out of the Abyss adventure. And those are copied and pasted as far as I can tell. Like Demogorgon, Grazit, Orcus, all of those, Baphomet, they were all in that particular adventure. So they reproduced them in this book, and for me, that's wasted pages, because if, I'm so used to looking for them in Out of the Abyss that my natural reflex is going to be to go to Out of the Abyss if I wanted to look at their stats. But not everybody bought that book. Not everybody's going to want to cart that around with them if they're using the Demon Lords in their homebrewed game. So I understand that, and having them reprinted is fine. Like, just because it's kind of a waste for me personally, doesn't mean that it's a negative for the book itself. It's just something to be aware of, that if you have that adventure, then there's going to be definitely some overlap. My major sort of nitpick, I guess you could say, with this book is the way that they handled the Lords of the Nine Hells. I really would have liked to have seen artwork depicting them, for starters. And the fact that there's no images of them really in here is, to me, just kind of baffling. They talk about Osmodius, they talk about, Belial and Furnia, they talk about, all these different lords of the Nine Hells, but you don't see them. You never see a single image of them. And there are spots where I think they definitely could have put an image of them in there. It doesn't have to be like this big, quarter-page, piece of art. It could have just been something small, kind of tucked away into a corner. But for example, this page here, which has like these banners, well, that's all cool and all, and yeah, they look nice, but why not have an image of Osmodius holding court over the other lords of the Nine Hells? Why not have the opportunity to see each of those individuals in this book? Like, why not do that? I'm assuming that they might be part of a future adventure, and if they are, I hope it's one of the ones to come out, in this year. It's probably not going to be the next one, because the event for that's called The Stream of Many Eyes, which to me sounds like a Beholder, but it could definitely be something else, so, they may be in that book. If that's the case, then that's totally fine, but if they hold off any longer than that, then it just seems weird that they wouldn't at least have them in here, and let the consumers see what they look like. Not everyone has the Book of Vile Darkness from D&D 3rd edition. Not everybody has the Fiendish Codexes from D&D 3.5 with the revised sort of updated looks to them. So it would have been nice to have had that representation in there. Speaking of which, their stats are not in this book either. So Osmodius, Belial and Furnia, and those are the names that really stick to into my mind the best, they are not in this book. When you have the Archdevils, they're not the actual Lords of the Nine Hells, with the exception of the one, which I think is Zerael, the fallen angel. And she's really cool. I mean, that's definitely a cool one to have in there, but she's also technically the weakest. She's the ruler of the first layer, which is typically, before that it was just a more powerful pit fiend. So it just feels weird that they're not in here, not even in image form, but, you know, again, you have Demogorgon, who is the most powerful of the Demon Lords. So if you're going to have the most powerful of the Demon Lords in a book that talks about the Blood Wars, why wouldn't you have the ruler of the Nine Hells, at the very least, in there to act as sort of a counterpoint? So anyway, it's sort of an odd choice for me, and again, in the next few weeks, we may find out exactly why that's the case. So I definitely reserve judgment on that point, and really it is more of a personal nitpick. I just think it's something that would have been kind of nice, that if you're going to dedicate, you know, space to talking about them, to be able to put a face to the name. Excuse me. Other than that, this is a really, really great book. I am looking forward to getting my other copy in the mail because, as I sort of stated before, with the way that the cover kind of picks up your handprints, I will probably just wipe this off and then try to find a place to display it where it's just on display, and if I want to actually use the information contained within, then I will do that with the other version, the normal, like the store version that you can get anywhere. One other small minor note was that in this book, a couple of the pages do have some small tears in them, and that's just the way that it came. Unfortunately, I didn't realize until I got home, and because this is likely after I, you know, kind of read through it once and get my other version, that this is going to become a display piece, I'm really not as concerned about it because, you know, if I'm just putting this on a shelf to look nice, then, you know, the actual pages itself is, you know, not as big a concern. It bothers me, but the odds of being able to replace this at this point in time, I don't know how good they are. I might contact Wizards of the Coast. We'll see how that goes. But anyway, for the time being, this is, like I said, an excellent book. And if you're thinking about it, I do highly recommend it. There are just a few minor nitpicks that I have. Anyway, this is not the full review. Of course, I'm going to spend a little bit more time with this book and give it about a week or so. And I will be back with my full-on review. And we'll see how my opinions change or potentially not. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. If you have this book, let me know in the comments below what you think of it, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Funding for this channel is provided by my awesome supporters over on Patreon. So everyone who has donated to that, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. Even $1 a month helps immensely, and without your guys' support, this channel would not be possible. I want to provide special thanks to Kennedy S., David L., Will W., Michael L., The Twisted Tentacle Inn, and Roll Stats for their generous donations. Thank you again to everyone who's contributed, and all of you make this possible.